Arthur C. Clarke said that two possibilities exist. Either we're alone in the universe, or we're not. And both are equally terrifying. And that's kind of what I am musing on tonight. Hi, Misha here, and another Blackbox, although maybe a little bit of a different one. The last Blackbox was on the firearms stuff. I've done a few throughout the year on political things, a few on social things. This time I wanted to kind of just muse and speculate. Let, my brain run a bit just to relax, and I invite you to add your own theories or just even musings, because this isn't going to be terribly serious and not scientific. But in it, I'm going to talk about each possibility and each permutation of each one, and just the kind of human psychology of it. Why not? Why right now? Well, I'm recording this towards the end of August, and I don't know why. Maybe it's because as a kid, and even more as a college student, summer I had more time to read. Plus, like right now I'm sitting outside, it's a pleasant evening, it's about 70 degrees. The crickets and cicadas are out. So I tended to read more science fiction in the summer. It seemed the time for sci-fi. Ironically, wintertime I read more horror, especially Stephen King. But in the summer, it was sci-fi. And the sci-fi I really enjoyed were things by Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, and many of the others from the 50s and 60s. Pretty much read every book of theirs I could get, at least book on tape, book on braille, which was pretty much all of them. And the thing about sci-fi in that era, it was quite optimistic, and often Arthur Clarke's books did not have villains as such. It was more man versus nature. Actually, it was kind of a, Jack London in the future, who, by the way, I really enjoyed Jack London as a younger child. In fact, I did a few school reports on him and his life and books. I was also a huge Ernest Hemingway fan. So that kind of gives you an idea of the type. And those guys, it is more man versus nature. Of course, sci-fi back then reflected the general zeitgeist of the time about the future, which was mostly optimistic if you could just avoid nuking the world out of existence. Well, some good news. We managed that, but it didn't turn out to be all roses after the end of the Cold War. And now science fiction tends to be more dystopian and pessimistic because, unfortunately, the zeitgeist for the future isn't all that positive. But why did science fiction of that era take space travel as kind of its main route? It's quite interesting. If you read those books, like 2001: A Space Odyssey, right there in the title, they expected to have, if not interstellar, they expected to have interplanetary travel by 2001. We might laugh at that today, but back then it wasn't unrealistic. Think about it, guys. The first man-made object to go into space was the V-2 rocket, 1944-1945. By 1957, we had Sputnik, and actually by 1959, the Soviets landed an artificial object, and I'm using landed rather loosely there, on the moon. And of course, by 1961, Yuri Gagarin, and followed a month later by Alan Shepard, were the first men in space. So in less than a generation, less than 20 years, we went into space. And in less than a decade, and this is what blows my mind, even though I've lived with this fact my entire life, less than a decade, we went from the first man in space to two guys walking on the moon, and even more fun than that, playing a little bit of golf as such on the moon a few missions later. And then we had, Skylab. And the Soviets were doing very good things in space too. So it wasn't unrealistic to think that in 30 more years, we could make it to Jupiter. Unfortunately, science tech for space travel stagnated. And it has a lot to do with the space shuttle. As cool as the space shuttle was, it was because of it that we never really had the Mars missions. And I sincerely believe if we'd had the drive, we could have made it to Mars. Would it have been easy? No. Would it have cost lives? Maybe. Would we have needed international cooperation? Almost certainly. But we could have done it. But on the other hand, if you look at the books from the 50s and 60s, often the computer technology isn't as interesting as what we have today. I mean, look at the computer from the Enterprise and Star Trek. Yeah, and really we have computers better than that today. And the whole internet idea, the whole thing that you're listening to this Blackbox video with, really didn't exist. In fact, the first, and I'm sure there were ones before, I know there were, but if you notice in the original Star Wars, they do kind of mention the Imperial Network, they do kind of mention the HoloNet a bit. They had more of a notion of the internet, but it really is not something you're going to find. So it's interesting. I just thought I'd give this preface. Again, this is not a very tight video, but with that, let's talk about the universe we live in and the first possibility that we're alone in it. Our universe is at least 13 billion years old. And even that's just an estimation based on the light we've been able to detect. Doesn't matter, it's really old. Even older than Betty White. And no one knows how many stars are in the Milky Way. The low-end estimate is 50 billion. The high-end estimate is 500 billion. The truth is probably around 100 billion, maybe 200. And a majority of stars are actually in binary systems, or even trinary. So, yeah, there's a couple, and other stars don't have planets. So how many stars have planets? It's anyone's guess. But in the millions, if not billions. And our galaxy is only one galaxy out of millions that we even know of in the observable universe. So ad infinitum, basically. Millions upon millions of possibilities. And humans existing on Earth is, frankly, a miracle. All the things that had to come for us to exist, everything that had to be just right, everything had to be just so. But the fact we're here meant it happened. And if you see all these permutations, all these millions upon millions of possibilities, we're that fraction. It happened just out of chance, possibility. So if we're alone, we needed this entire universe to have life evolve because it was such a slim chance. Why is this terrifying? Because we're alone. We're it. If we don't thrive and succeed, if we don't go to the stars, if we kill ourselves, or if we're just wiped out by a natural disaster, that's it. The house is empty. Even if we go into space, we'll go to the Mars and we'll find dust. We'll go to Jupiter and find gas. We'll go further out into the Oort cloud and find ice. And maybe one day we'll develop faster than light. And we'll eagerly go to the next system. And the next, and the next, and the next. And it'll be brave new worlds. It'll be new territory. Room for humanity to grow. but we won't find anything. We'll look and we'll look, thinking maybe next time, maybe next planet. And eventually that would kill our spirit. After hundreds, thousands, millions of years, we would realize we were alone. And eventually we would give up. We would poof and wonder what it's all about, where we came from. Will life ever randomly be generated again? But in the end, we'll be like someone on a desert island alone, and we'll give up. And that's terrifying. Humans are social creatures. We want that interaction. We need it viscerally. Even people that are kind of introverted like myself need companionship. We all do, on some level. So to think there's this vastness in the heavens, cold, empty, echoing darkness, with no anything out there. That's why that's terrifying. Luckily, it's virtually an impossibility. Simply by sheer chance. And the possibilities of so much space, and the fact that we're most likely not unique. Alien life exists. I would wager that microbial alien life is uncommon, but quite available. That animal type or even plant type alien life might be rare, but something you'll come across in every 1,000 or 2,000 systems maybe. An intelligent alien life, well, some would argue we have no evidence that it exists at all, meaning not even us. But let's just say intelligence at least comparable with our own. Even if it is an exceedingly rare thing, the phrase 1 in a million. Considering there are millions upon millions of possibilities. It happens. How frequently or not, we don't know. We can only speculate. Because we've only started to explore our tiny little corner of the Milky Way. But we've done a damn good job of it in the last 20 years. Space is a giant gulf. So one possibility is that we do finally get our shit together and we do explore space. Let's say we go to Mars and we find ruins of an alien civilization. Or maybe we have to go 10 or 20 solar systems over and then we find ruins. It's likely that even if distance wasn't against us, time could be. The universe is ancient. There could have been life similar to ours right here in our own backyard. And it could have been, in the grand scale of things, quite recent. Maybe just 10 million years ago. But they're gone now. And we never would have known. That said, it would still be fascinating to just try to decipher their left behinds. Now, don't get me wrong. If they're on an Earth-type planet, a lot of it will be destroyed with time. But if it's in a vacuum, like on the moon, it could be remarkably well preserved, all things considered. But time does erase everything. So, what we discover is really kind of dependent on that. The other possibility is distance. There could be dozens of intelligent civilizations, maybe even relatively near to us, and we may never know. Maybe light speed really is the ultimate barrier. I don't think so, but possible. Even if you do achieve light speed, the universe is the galaxy we live in is about 200,000 light years across. And that's just one galaxy. In between galaxies, millions upon millions, depending on where exactly you're going. Andromeda is one of our near neighbors. To cross the void between galaxies would just take forever, unless you have something truly amazing. So we might be there. We might be relatively close to each other, but no way to actually shake hands. But we could still talk. It would be a very long, drawn-out chess game, with a move only every few hundred years. But we could communicate back and forth slowly over time. And since the universe is so old, if civilization continued for thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years, we could eventually communicate back and forth. We might be, separated by oceans of space, and time would take a lot to get signals from one to the other, but it's kind of like casting a bottle into the sea with a message. Eventually, they would make it to us, and we could reply, assuming communication could be established. That would be an interesting dynamic, because we would know that there was alien life. We would also have the somewhat security of knowing they're too far away to impact us one way or the other. The thing is that they'd be too far to help us, but also too far to hurt us. So it would be lonely, but not in the sense of us being truly alone. And it would lead to an interesting dynamic of just how things... And we still would have our own solar system. There are a lot of resources in our solar system. Ice and minerals and the other things yet undiscovered. So even if we were only able really to exploit our little area, there's a lot here for us to work with for tens of thousands of years. So maybe alien races, us included, will just colonize their home systems. Maybe some of them will be lucky and have another neighboring system close enough by that reaching a significant fraction of the speed of light, they could get there in a few centuries and exploit that too. So that's one possibility that comes to mind as well. Of course, the classic alien contact scenario is they show up in our skies. Coming from light years upon light years away. And why are they here? What do they want? Lots of people have theorized one or the other. There's a certain group that says, well, any species advanced enough to organize to have interstellar, even maybe intergalactic travel would be mostly peaceful and kind of outgrown warfare. So they might just be coming to say hello. They might just be interested. They might just be bored. This is definitely the Star Trek way of looking at things. Of course, an alternative theory, they could see us as unintelligent, subhuman cockroaches. They could maybe not be cruel or malicious, but they may just not view us as anything to care about, much as we view insects and bugs. Or maybe they would view us like we do dogs and cats, and we would become pets. I remember reading a book as a child that was like that. The City of Gold and Iron, or Gold and Lead. I think it was. We don't know. The thing is, we don't know alien psychology. Sorry, moving my mic, so sorry for the rustling. They may feel like they're moral. To be fair, hell, the Nazis thought they were moral. Or at least they thought might makes right. They also may be inadvertently cruel to us. We don't know what their psychology will be. Something tells me it would either be exceedingly similar to humans, and then we'll find there's kind of a universal constant, and I'm going to revisit that in a little bit here, or it would be just terribly different. And that would probably depend on if their home world is similar to Earth or something like, say, Jupiter. Or even weirder. We don't know. It's also the thing about scale. You know, for a human, we're between 5 and 6 feet tall, is a rough estimate. What if they're between 5 and 6 inches? Their whole body, not their penis. Or 2 penises if they're Klingons, apparently. Or they could be 5 or 6 miles tall. Wouldn't that be something? So yeah, we don't know if they showed up, how they would view us. And since we have never had an alien contact that we're aware of, either one is equally possible. Both have valid points. Also, why would they come here? And I have an interesting thought experiment on that. Traveling the gulf between stars. Let's assume that they don't have wormhole technology, instantaneous travel, and that it does take them decades, centuries, even millennia to travel from system to system. Would they not become like the Roma, the gypsies? After living in space for so long, their bodies, their brains, their hearts, their poop holes would become adapted to that. Either artificial gravity or zero-G or something else. Maybe they wouldn't even want to stay on a planet. Something tells me they would get very comfortable on board their ships. They may just kind of drift amongst the stars, going by a planet or an asteroid, to, get resources. Chances are their ships would be a pretty advanced and efficient ecological system. But once in a while, you need to top off the water or go by a star to top off the gas tank. So maybe they just pop over to planets to refuel, and then they go on about their business through the galaxy. Now, how would they do this? Would it be violent? Maybe they, like Independence Day, where they come to Earth and they raid us for our resources or signs. Honestly, I don't think that's likely, because the universe is so big and vast. Why, even if you're a malicious species or amoral, why go to the bother of raiding a planet that A, already has life on it, and B, that has already been contaminated by that life? There have to be many more pristine worlds, hell, even like Europa in our own solar system, to go to. So I don't think if they were just resource scavenging, they would come to us. It would probably be more for science. Or just to chill out, like we're shore leave. And then they get back on their spaceship, and maybe their race has been at this thousands or millions of years, and they'll drift away, Let's say there's 50 or 100 large city ships, hell, even continent ships, nearly planet ships. I mean, space would be unlimited on the size, and if you're not in a hurry to get anywhere, who cares? Maybe they would drift apart for a while, and then, of course, there's relativity. Time would be different, and then they would meet up like a rendezvous, like they used to have in the West, or like, again, the gypsies, and they would trade interesting resources they each found on other worlds, trade interesting stories, trade those pet humans they picked up on that weird rock, a couple of million years ago that they've been breeding in captivity, much like we've done for, dachshunds or Siamese cats. I don't know. I found that interesting, of a true space culture. Not only would their bodies be adapted for space travel, think about it, they would be less vulnerable, assuming their ships are well built and easily maintained, built to last. They could even build them out of hollowing out an asteroid or something. There you go. Do that. You could take a lot of the variables out. They wouldn't be at the mercy of nature. They wouldn't be at the mercy of a sun going nova. They wouldn't definitely be at the mercy of an asteroid. You know, if something happened in the system they're in, just leave. Or if an aggressive species comes around, leave. You know, being planet-based, you're kind of tied to it. But if you can take your home with you anywhere, if the situation isn't ideal, you can go. And if you feel like hanging out in orbit of a star for a few hundred years, park yourself in orbit around a star and chill. I don't know. I just think that would be an interesting culture. Also just an interesting idea for kind of a setting for this thing of, you know, taking the planets out of it, making the planets a very minor thing, and they're just living in space, and all's well and whatnot. On the other hand, the opposite could happen. We assume that any aliens that would show up in our sky would be advanced and wise and without major issues, having resources. What if that's not the case, though? What if they're refugees from a dying race? What if something happened in their home system and they're able just barely to cobble together a spaceship or a small fleet of spaceships? And they set out on this perilous voyage to Earth because they detected us through one signal or another. What if they show up as needing our help? What if their ships are falling apart? What if they're sick? What if they're fleeing an aggressive species? Think about the psychology of that. And I know this is not an original thought. There have been books and TVs shows about this. But it's also another thing. What if they're at our mercy? Think about it. Even if they have more advanced technology than us, what if there's only a few thousand or even a million of them? How much would their advanced technology help them against billions of us on our own home soil? Think about how Rome fell. At some point, the unwashed, dirty hordes, humans, would win. And maybe they could destroy us, but they have that moral compass, and they just wouldn't do that. But what if their technology is such that they exerted all their fuel to get here, and if we don't get along with them, they're dead? Yeah. It's kind of part of the, underlying plot of Earth Final Conflict, a show that I think had so much potential and was so terribly squandered. And we won't even talk about season 5. But that's the, one possibility amongst others. And we don't know their technological level. As Arthur Clarke said, any technology sufficiently advanced appears as magic. That's possible. They could be so far above us, or they could just be a little bit above us. Again, if they had to leave their home system out of desperation, they might have just cobbled together a near FTL ship and been taking a journey either on a generational ship or a sleeper ship. Depending on their biology, maybe sleeper ships are more practical for them than they would be for us. I honestly find the idea of a generation ship very creepy because insulated societies like that often don't do well. And I've talked about that a bit when it comes to sleeper ships when I did that, con video a little while back on the DUI 100. But it's interesting food for thought. But what if, instead of them coming to us, we go to them? Often in science fiction, it's a conceit that humans are the new kids, and we're technologically primitive compared to a lot of aliens. But what if it's us? What if we manage to somehow pull out of this tailspin we seem to have been in the last couple of years, get our shit together, we have some good scientific breakthroughs, we colonize our solar system, and then we develop either FTL or near FTL travel. The neat thing about near FTL travel, it doesn't solve everything, For the people on the ground, of course, it would take centuries, even millennia, to get to nearby solar systems. But for the people on board the ship, it wouldn't necessarily take that long. If we could get close to light speed, say 0.8 or even 0.9 light speed, perhaps we could get to a nearby system in only a year or two relativistic time, or even a little bit slower, say 0.5 or 0.6 light. We could get there in 10 or 20 years. If it's a well-appointed spaceship, especially if we have cryo technology, sleeper ship technology, we could get there. We could do that. We could definitely put up with it if the reward were worth it. So what if we detect signals ourselves from a nearby solar system, Alpha Centauri, for example, Zeta Reticuli, and we go there, and we show up in their skies. And of course, our technological level could be at various points. What would we find, and how would they react to us? Now, at this point, if they're more primitive, they could be pretty aggressive. Or they could be very pacifistic, very zen-like. We don't know. Or they may not. But the weirdest thing might just be if we got there and they're like, who cares? Another weird thing to think about. We, as far as we know, not getting into ancient astronaut theory, we've evolved in a void. We don't know if there are alien races or not. What if an alien race we made contact with knew that they were alien races since the dawn of their civilization? Let's say they knew that they were seeded or helped out. Let's say, 500 years ago, an asteroid was coming to their planet, another alien ship zipped over, took care of the asteroid for them, said, hey, we're just going to help you out, but hey, we've got a rendezvous to trade some humans we've been breeding because they've got some worm people they've been breeding and we need new pets. So we're going to be on. What if they have known that there are other alien races and we're not their first? Basically, yeah, what if they're not virgins? What if they're not their first? They'd be like, nice to meet you. How long you staying? A lot could happen there. And then we would be in the minority. We don't know how they would accept us, where they would live, and of course the type of planet would matter. Is it like Earth? Is it a rocky planet with a lot of water and oxygen? Or is it something like Venus? Is it with exceedingly high pressure and acidic atmosphere? Or is it like Mars, where it's virtually a vacuum and very little? Maybe they live underground. Maybe they had that asteroid hit and we show up and they're just barely eking over. Maybe, unlike our other civilization that escaped, they didn't, and we'll find the remnants of a dying race that's clinging on with the fingertips or tentacles or their double penises, and we will watch them finally die. Unless, of course, you figure out we can breed with them, and then we have hybrids, which is obviously the Star Trek way of doing things. Boy, if humans can fuck it in Star Trek, they will not just fuck it, they will make babies with it. Yeah. Remember the lizard people from Threshold and Voyager? Babies. And Odo tried his damnedest to make a baby with Kira. I don't think that worked. Although, what would a half-changeling, half-Bajoran be like? What was I talking about again? I got distracted by a puddle of goo with a really bad attitude. So yeah, that's another possibility. The universe is old, but we could be one of the first races. In fact, right now, as far as we know, that's more likely than us being young, for the simple fact that we haven't contacted another race or been contacted by another race that we know of. Maybe it does take 13 billion years for intelligent life to evolve, and we'll get out there and realize that we're kind of the first kid on the block. We don't know yet. Food for thought, no? Regardless of how we meet them, what would aliens be like? Theoretically, and this is just me, I think they're either going to be exceedingly similar to us or incredibly different. Why similar? Well, if they grew up, well, let's say that we just kind of figure out that our type of organic life, cellular life, evolves on our type of planet in the Goldilocks zone. Let's kind of figure out that maybe life started from a certain point and that through millions and billions of years, the same pattern of life has been spread. Or maybe an ancient alien progenitor race, kind of again a la Star Trek, seeded life or encouraged life or genetically altered life. Basically, we would figure out that we were all distant cousins. And then maybe there was some intergalactic Adam and Eve. The couple from the Bible, not the sex shop. So yeah, if that's the case, we might all be essentially human, at least to some extent on a base level. Just of course, evolution over time changes us. Kind of like how when humans finally started to be able to sail the high seas, because for much of early human history, just crossing the Mediterranean and other large bodies like that, which are quite small, all things considered, was hard to do. But think about it, when, say, Europeans or the Chinese started to explore the oceans and they'd find new islands and other new continents, like, say, Australia, they didn't find, say, Homo erectus or Neanderthals or, you know, any of the other hominids. They found Homo sapien. Maybe the galaxy, the universe is kind of that same notion. And in that case, you would have a world like Star Trek, where the alien races, yeah, they're different, but they're genetically compatible, at least some of them. And yeah, if you really go by, say, the alien abduction and alien contact stories, this would actually support that, because in those, the aliens that people meet are, you know, like us. Two arms, two heads, two legs, a penis, or a vagina. Because if you know a lot of those alien kind of, yeah, there's a lot of fucking going on. I'm just not gonna lie about it. Yeah, there you go. That is a possibility. On the other hand, they could just be totally different from us, and even learning to say hello could take centuries. If they evolved, as I said at the beginning of the video, on something like Jupiter, heck, what if they evolved in a star, or in the orbit of a star, or the opposite of that? What if they essentially evolved in deep space, in a vacuum? I don't know how. Again, I'm not a scientist. They could be so radically different from us that it would be difficult for both of us to really even identify the other as a life form. I don't know. And in that instance, we might know of each other, but we would become mysteries and enigmas to kind of ponder over, kind of like how we view whales or dolphins. And I am of the opinion that animals are more intelligent than we give them credit for, at least some of them. Most dogs, excluding poodles. I don't believe that poodles are the most intelligent. I think they're the most demonic. Chihuahuas are cool, though, even though they're basically evolved rats. And, of course, everyone knows cats are more intelligent than humans. Just ask any cat, and they will look at you that way. I swear that Hobo, I joke, but I think she wonders how humans even get out of bed. She looks at us like she pities us. That's why she tries to hurt us. Anyway. So it could be just radically different. And that's interesting too. And that's actually good for us in a way, because if we're that different, we would have very different need for resources. And therefore we probably wouldn't have conflict over it. Just a thought there. And speaking of conflict, I don't think it's terribly likely. If you look on Earth, conflict arises through scarcity of resources, through limitations. when you have 10 people and only 2 things. But when you have 10 people and 10 things, or 10 people and 20 things, there's not much to fight over. A lot of times this can be land, property. You're not going to fight someone over their area when there's plenty of other area for the taking. Even if it's not an amoral thing or immoral thing to do, it's not an efficient use of resources. When you are gathering resources, you want to expend as little as you can to get as much as you can. So warfare is really last resort. And if you notice, Europe had a lot of infighting before the New World was discovered and colonized. And then once that happened, it gave a safety valve, a release valve for excess populations to go to. And you actually had significant periods of peace in Europe, at least until, you had huge warfare burst out, like the Napoleonic Wars, World War I and World War II. But in between those, with the exception of World War I and World War II, there were centuries, or at least a century, I should say, of peace. And that's because there was the New World to discover. Now, I know that it already belonged to the Native Americans. That's not a topic for this video. But, even here, there wasn't conflict until much of the continent was captured. But it did help. And in space, you wouldn't be limited to one solar system, one planet. Again, millions upon millions of possibilities. Why fight those stupid humans or try to steal from them or enslave them? Just go to the next solar system and take resources that are essentially free for they're on the next planet. I can't imagine we have anything super rare here on Earth that could not be found elsewhere. I mean, life is going to be rare. Intelligent life is even rarer. But elements have to be a lot more common. So I think the only reason for life, for coming here would be to engage with us in more of a scientific, philosophical, or even just artistic purpose. That might be me trying to be a little too optimistic there, but I don't think they would really want our planet. Again, we've kind of already polluted it and contaminated it, and we've used up a good amount of its resources, fossil fuels and what have you. So I don't know, it just seems like there's a lot easier, better things. It'd be like trying to, instead of, going to McDonald's and instead of getting a new McRib and fries up front, you just go over to someone's table who's got a 3/4 eaten McRib and you just eat that. I don't know, it just doesn't seem sensible to me. No, I think if they're going to hurt humanity or threaten it, it's going to be more through them just viewing us as useless and insignificant. There might be, intergalactic, interstellar politics beyond us, and we don't know. It could be like Star Wars and the Galactic Senate, where everyone's there, and there's bigger things, or like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, one of the best book series of all time. It could be anything like that. We don't know. But I just don't see why they would need our resources, except in that one case of where they themselves are fleeing refugees. They come to Earth. They do not have resources to go anywhere else, and we don't get along. But then again, if they're that desperate, they would also be pretty weak. And I don't know. Again, I'm only speculating here. But, hey, that's kind of the fun of all this, right? Plus, it's a nice night out. I like the sound of bugs. It truly is a universe of possibilities. When you consider just the diversity of life we found on Earth and the difference and whatnot of cultures. See, I view differences between peoples is a positive thing. To me, myself, and I, it's wonderful. When the internet first came around in the 1990s, and when my cousins first told me about ICQ, when I got on there, what I really liked doing was talking with people from all around the world: Australia, New Zealand, Japan, South America, Canada, the UK, France, and yes, Russia and China. That was so cool. Maybe today it's hard to understand why that was so special, but back then you got to meet people, and it was just neat to compare takes on movies or share different music. It was really neat to have them send me MP3s, because those came around 97, of different things that they enjoyed. Hey guys, I had to do something on the internet since I couldn't really appreciate it for its real purpose. I'm talking, of course, about porn. Don't get me wrong, and if I could see, I would. I'm human. But since I couldn't do that, I talked to international people, and it was great. So if we're lucky, that's how contact with aliens will go. We will celebrate the diversity, they'll celebrate theirs. And it'll seem weird at times, but hopefully they have something like literature. Hopefully they have something like art, and we can have a cultural exchange. There's no reason to think it has to go poorly. And there's no reason to think humanity can't strive, because there is something good in us as humans. Yes, there's a lot of bad. There's a lot of nastiness. But we don't have to bow to those tendencies. There is also a lot of good and a lot of generosity in us. There's a lot of beauty that's been created in this world by human beings. We need to find that part of ourselves, and we need to cultivate it. And hopefully the aliens do the same. Because I am absolutely, I'm going to say 100% in my mind convinced that there is intelligent life out there. Now, when and where, and is it reachable? I don't know that. I like to think so. Again, I don't think light speed is the ultimate barrier. Throughout human history, people have claimed that that's it. That's the one thing. The famous example will be the sound barrier. For a long, long time, people thought you could not go any faster than the speed of sound. And for a long time, people didn't think humans could even have powered flight. There's all kinds of things we thought weren't possible, and then we'll achieve it. Maybe just brute force won't be the way to go, FTL, but we're still learning about physics. We'll find a way. And with that, alien cultures will have as well, I bet you. Will it be warp speed like Star Trek? Will it be hyperdrive like Star Wars, which is basically the same thing but a lot faster? Notice in Star Trek it takes them, 100 years to cross a good chunk of the galaxy. In Star Trek they do it in about 2 days. They can cross nearly half the galaxy in 2 days. That's a lot faster. Or maybe it'll be like folding space from Dune, where you just get really, really high on something and imagine moving from one place to another, and you just do it. To me, I call that college. So maybe I already went FTL in college. Some nights it felt like it, I'm not going to lie. Or it could be like Stargate, where you have wormholes, complete with weird noises and kind of liquidy water, not water stuff. We don't know the means of FTL. But relativity would work in our favor there, because even if we can't quite hit light speed, if we get close enough to it, we can at least bend time to work in our favor, at least on the board the ship. Of course, for anyone on the ground, time would progress normally and it would take time. So what is out there? Is the possibility of alien life terrifying? It can be. Some humans are just terrified of the weird, the unique, the unknown. So for such people, it would be equally terrifying. It also is terrifying that they could destroy us, inadvertently or intentionally. Or they could, although I don't know why they'd want to, enslave us. I don't know what use we would be. But either way, it's possible. It could be like Battlefield Earth. Who knows? It's possible, but not likely. So while I understand the aspect of alien life being terrifying, and while I love his books, I don't think it's near as terrifying as the prospect of being alone. That, to me, is the most terrifying thing. I mean, the idea for most of us dying alone in a nursing home with all of our friends and family gone is horrific. And I think as a species, that would be horrific for us. No, it's better to know our neighbors and hope that we can at least tolerate them. Imagine if we meet aliens and they're like an interstellar Karen, like, you know, the bad neighbor that's always bugging you, and like they plant trees in our solar system, or they argue where the fence is. What if it just turned out to be something like that? Or they're like Alien Kramer, where they just like barge in occasionally and, you know, don't do anything bad. They're just wacky and weird, and yeah, that'd be great. I think that was pretty much Mork and Mindy, wasn't it? I miss Robin Williams. Also really miss David Bowie. And Space Oddity was a great album. Really do like sci-fi because the world is not enough for it. You have an entire universe as your playground. And if it can be imagined, it's a possibility. And there's so many possibilities out there. Who knows? Every day, every minute, we could make contact. We've been sitting here, this Earth, putting broadcasts out in space, even throwing a few artifacts out in space. They could show up any morning, any time. And what would that do? Well, you know, earlier this summer, I did a Blackbox on the whole UAP phenomenon. If you'd told me when I was a kid in the 80s that one day the U.S. government would acknowledge UFOs were at least a real thing, not that aliens are real, but at least something is out there that may be known one day, but for now they're at least saying, hey, we don't know something. That's already immense progress. And with that, with everything else that's gone on the last 2 years, would it really surprise you if one morning we wake up and there was contact? And for my final part here, I thought I would talk about how the individual event itself could potentially play out. Of course, it's possible that the classic scenario happens. They just show up with the ominous, quiet, impressive ship hanging over every capital, every major city, and they announce, we come in peace, or we come in war, or we're going to come inside you with our two penises. You never know. Maybe we're just an interstellar booty call. Either way, they show up, they announce themselves, and relations go from there. Kind of like Childhood's End from Arthur Clarke. Another possibility, maybe more interesting and probably wiser for them, they announce their arrival years in advance. They start sending signals to us, giving coordinates, showing their ship or their fleet coming. And that would make a lot of sense. And it may even be necessary. It would give us and them time to prepare, keeping them safe, especially, And it may just be a requirement. If their technology isn't folding space or wormhole, if it's FTL or even near FTL, they would need a lot of time to slow down and kind of park themselves in orbit of our planet. So we would first hear them and we could detect them coming a long ways off. So what if that's the case? What if we detect them, but they won't be here for 10, 20, 40 years? What if people know aliens are out there and are coming, but they won't live to see it? Like if you told me right now that aliens will be here in 40 years, there's not, I could live to be that old, but I could very well not. Of course, at least we would know. We could begin communication on some level. But yeah, they might announce their arrival in advance, and we could watch them slowly come in to our home system and, wait to see what happens there. Possibility. On the other hand, if they use wormhole tech or gate tech of some type, they could avoid the whole ship thing altogether and just open up portals in our world and walk on through interdimensional portals, let's say. That'd be a interesting thing. No giant ships, no voices from the deep of space, just weird aliens coming. Or if their biology is so different, maybe they will come in a way that we don't even recognize. It's also possible that they would come in stealth, kind of Star Trek First Contact style. Not the movie, but the whole idea, where they will come as undercover operatives to A, learn about us, and B, decide if it's worth making contact. And of course, this would be the theory where they're already here, and they have been here. Yeah, there's also a possibility that nothing happens for a while, centuries. We develop our own space tech, and we meet them in neutral space. We meet them in deep space, mano a mano, one ship to another. It's not terribly likely considering the vastness of space and how small a ship would probably be, but it's possible. That's kind of how Babylon 5, I believe, First Contact happened in that series. That would be less dramatic, but maybe safer, because we could perhaps protect our home system there. I don't know. What if they're Kilrathi? Anyone remember Wing Commander? Would it come as a surprise to anyone if I kind of said I would like to meet intelligent big cats? I think that'd be great, as long as they didn't lick me or have barbed penises. That would not be, or vaginas with teeth. Anyway. Lots of possibilities. And I'm bringing this up now, doing this video, to give perspective on the world's problems and what seems earth-shattering and important. Perspective, if nothing else, maybe is a distraction. So what do you think? It's been a rough year, guys. We've all lost friends and family, jobs. The election cycle was hard on everyone on both sides. The news in the gun world hasn't been great. The events in Afghanistan have been appalling. Sometimes it's good to step back and realize that this too shall pass. And that worrying, well, who by worrying has added a single day to their lives? I believe someone said that of note. sometimes it's good to step back. Where one little blue dot hanging in a void of emptiness, and our source of life is a burning nuclear ball of gas. Our existence is so unlikely. We've made it so far. Just evolving to intelligence, to be self-aware, was such an accomplishment for our species. We've come so far in recent years, in recent decades, technologically, and even culturally and morally. I know we like to think that, people are bad and amoral, but guys, if you go back in history, it was a lot worse. Look how women were treated in most cultures going back in years and years ago. Look how slavery was viewed. Look how people with disabilities like myself had been treated. I know it doesn't seem like it sometimes, but we really have made advancements. We have to continue. We have to find that good in ourselves and cultivate it. And we have to recognize the small, primitive, bitter parts of us. We can't eliminate it. Heck, we shouldn't. We need that. We need our teeth. Metaphorically and literally, having dentures would suck. But it needs to be in its place. If you recognize that small, selfish part of yourself, you can control it and use it to your advantage. Not let it control you. And of course, when we see shows like Star Trek or Babylon 5, I would say Star Wars, but frankly, the alien component in Star Wars is very minor. It's more of a reflection of us, our society, and our problems. Aliens would have their own societies and problems and history. As a historian, that to me would be one of the coolest parts, would be learning about a whole alien civilization's history. How neat. I wonder if they have guns. Is there an alien Kalashnikov? I want an alien-made Kalashnikov. Unless Kalashnikov himself was an alien? So maybe it already is? Maybe I'm the alien and you're all aliens to me? I don't know. By the way, I'm totally sober. So if you think it's weird now, just imagine me 20 some odd years ago in college when I was not totally sober and having these conversations. But I've always loved these types of thought experiments. How great. How fun. And that's, I don't know, science fiction has always been summer for me. Here we are at the end of August. September is coming soon, to quote R.E.M. And we'll be into fall. But there'll be another summer, hopefully. So we'll see where they go. What do you think? What would your thoughts on contact be in alien civilizations? And would they have cats? I would like them to have cats. I don't know. OG of Blackbox wanted to do something different. Let me know what you think of this one. Like I said, it was a very pleasant evening to set out, so I was in no hurry to head in. I've been a little under the weather, been on some antibiotics. Nothing major, just a small infection. But feeling better, so I felt like doing something, guys. Let me know what you think. I don't know. I have a few other topics in mind, but we'll get to those next time. With that, I'm going to go in and clean up, eat a bite, and hit the hay, folks, and enjoy my Sunday. I appreciate you just hanging out and musing with me tonight, and I'll catch you very soon next time.